Today, we're going to be talking about present middle participles, also known as progressive middle participles. The distinction here is that they're not happening in the present tense all of the time, but they're happening in the same tense as the verb, and that's how they're progressive. So I'm going to be calling them progressive middle participles. First, what is a participle? Just like Latin, participle is a form of the verb. And just like Latin, it's a verbal adjective that must agree with the noun it modifies in both case, number, and gender. And we're going to talk about how to do that in a second. But let's talk about forming it. And it's really easy to form. You take your first principal part and you get your stem. Now we're going to have normal verbs, epsilon contract verbs, and alpha contract verbs, so pay attention to the difference between these. But then you simply add omenos to this stem. Now with luo, our normal verb, it's easy. It's luomenos. But for our epsilon and alpha contract verbs, those letters hit the omicron and change. So it's philomenos and timomenos. So you've got omicron, upsilon for epsilon contract verbs, and an omega for alpha contract verbs. And we're going to decline this like a normal adjective, which we'll see right here. So it's really a three-part adjective. It's luomenos, luomene, and luomenon. Our masculine, luomenos, is going to use the second declension masculine endings. Our feminine, luomene, is going to use our first declension feminine endings. And our neuter, luomenon, is going to use second declension neuter endings. Now these are all endings that you should be very familiar with, but if you need a second, you can pause the video here and write them down. So finally, let's talk about the translation and use of the progressive middle participle. It's translated just like the present active participle in Latin, so it's basically just verbing, so philumenos, loving. And most of its uses will look just like Latin as well. It's mostly used as an adjective. Whether it's attributive or circumstantial, these are just terms for where it occurs in a sentence. But when we see it, it's basically working like any other adjective. So oi douloi ento agro ergadzomenoi kam nusen. Here we have ergadzomenoi modifying douloi. They're in the same case, number, and gender. They're nominative, plural, masculine. So the slaves working in the fields are tired. The one interesting thing about Greek, where it differs from Latin, is that a participle can be used in a supplementary sense, which just means it finishes the meaning of a verb, which you would never see in Latin. So here we have ha doulos pauetai ergadzomenos. The slave stops working. Note that it's still the slave that's doing the working, or here, stopping the working. So ergadzomenos is still modifying the slave. But here, the participle is finishing the meaning of the verb.